Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of the Public Safety Coordinating Council for Hillsborough County, Florida, May 17th, 2019. Ms. President, if we could have a roll call, please.
Ms. Holt,
Here.
Sheriff Cronister,
Wayne Bunton for Sheriff Cronister.
Chief Judge Figueroa, Mr. Warren,
Renee Marati for Andrew Warren.
Judge Jeske,
Miriam Valkenburg for Judge Jeske.
Commissioner Merman, Ms. Frank,
Pat Frank for Pat Frank.
Mr. Bates,
Here.
Mr. Parkinson,
Here.
Ms. Lewis,
Here.
Chief Dugan,
Here.
Ms. Grant,
Here.
Ms. Royston,
Here.
Ms. Ulrey, Ms.
Ms. Ulrey
Campbell,
just walked in the door.
Colonel Bunton,
Colonel Bunton here for Colonel Bunton as well.
Chief Daniel,
Here.
Ms. Condemo,
Here.
Mr. Eakins, Mr. Proctor, Councilman Dinkfelder, Senator Rousing. And I will come back to you, Ms. Ulrey.
Here. Thank you.
We have quorum.
And Ms. Justice has arrived for Judge Figueroa. Good morning.
I apologize for being late.
All right. Thank you all very much. In your packet would be the minutes of our January 25th, 2019 meeting. If you could review the minutes, and then if an appropriate motion can be made.
Motion to accept.
Motion to accept the minutes by Mr. Bates,
Second the motion.
a second by Ms. Marati. Is there any discussion on the motion? Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions that need to be made to the minutes before the motion is voted on? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Under old business, we have 2019 legislative issues/concerns. I know that we had a lot of activity. At least on behalf of the State Attorney's Office and the Public Defender's Office, we would certainly thank not only our legislative delegation, but we would certainly thank the entire legislature, and in particular the Speaker of the House, which made the incoming salary of assistant public defenders and assistant state attorneys set it at $50,000, which is an increase from $39,900. And we had not received an increase since 2004, and so we publicly today thank them for recognizing the critical issues that we were facing regarding recruitment and retention in this area. And both Mr. Warren, myself, Mr. Wiseman, we were actively working on this issue, and so I thank you to all my partners that assisted in moving that issue forward. Thank you all very much for that. Ms. Frank, do you have something for us?
Well, the clerks had a bill in which was, and on the last day, there was an amendment piggybacked on another bill, and we were not even aware of it. And what happened was, at least they allowed us to keep the funds that we had not spent in the previous year, because frequently we have that, we can't pay things until the services are rendered. Therefore, we have leftover money at the end of the fourth quarter. We've always had a problem with carrying that over, but this year they let us carry it over. But in doing so, what they did was they thought they were being very clever, because I have a lawsuit against the state saying that they have been withholding money from us since 2008 for fines, fees, and costs that are directed to us in the Constitution, and instead they've been taking it for general revenue. So on that same bill, they put a synopsis of how they're going to take all those monies in the statute forward. They're going to take all those monies from us, thinking that they're correcting my lawsuit. They aren't. So my lawsuit is going ahead, and as of yesterday, we're in the first District Court of Appeal, and they had wanted one of the district court judges had ordered us to have a stay in order to determine whether we should consolidate with another case that a clerk had filed down in Broward County. However, I opposed that because it didn't have the same issue. And the court yesterday decided that I was right. So we're now free to get a discussion with the court about how we go ahead. That means that's going to give us the avenue to go to the entire first district for the appeal. And so I think that's promoting our case in terms of timing, which pleases me. But the legislature thought they were doing something that they can't do, so let them do it.
Any other matters or issues? Commissioner Merman, good to see you, ma'am. Any other issues? I do know that we have some meetings that are set in terms of that it looks like we might have another expansion that can occur with our Veterans Treatment Court based on the new statute that has been passed. And so I'm sure all of y'all will probably be getting invitations because that'll impact the services that are needed. And we usually look to the county quite often if we need to do an expansion. So I look forward to something such as that. As all of you know, the Veterans Treatment Court is a tremendous court, really is doing great things here in Hillsborough County, and we look forward to it, continuing to expand it, but it's clearly got to be a partnership. It's not anything that can just automatically happen because we do need, Ms. Ulrey.
Actually, the Department of Corrections had taken 40% out of the substance abuse treatment beds last year, and this year they are coming back. So I'm glad the 92 people waiting in jail can actually have some services. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Thank you to the Department of Corrections. Anyone else have anything to discuss? Okay. All right. The Domestic Violence Comprehensive Response Model.
Yes, Ms. Holt. If you recall, in fiscal year 2017, 2018, you had asked for the Domestic Violence Committee of the PSCC to convene and do an assessment of the domestic violence system. You had opined that had been a few years since the Family Justice Center had closed, and it would be a good time to kind of reevaluate where we were and determine if there was a better model or ways we can improve the system. That group did meet for 2 years and resulted in some recommendations and the application for Department of Justice Office of Violence Against Women grant application, which we were successful in. We received $900,000 to provide significant improvements to our domestic violence system. Part of that is on the clerk's side, part of that is in the community. The model that we're going to try and implement to the greatest extent that we can is called the Comprehensive Community Response Model, and that is the IT model right now in the United States, originally developed in Duluth. Essentially, the model is about better coordination and better communication among domestic violence stakeholders. To that end, our community partner is the Spring of Tampa Bay, and they have actually hired a manager or coordinator for our CCR process. Her name is Tennille Mislicki, and she's going to come up and talk a little bit about the process. I would like for everybody to become on a first-name basis with her because a lot of this is about communication and coordination, and she needs to have that ability. She'll also talk a little bit about an upcoming visit to one of the Duluth CCR model implementation communities. When last we talked, Mr. Bates and yourself had actually agreed to participate in that visit. So she's going to give us a little bit further detail and talk about what our upcoming processes are. Tennille, if you could take over.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, let me raise it up. I'm tall. I'm Tennille Mislicki. I'm from the Spring of Tampa Bay. And as Rob stated, we received this funding from the...
Microphone a little bit better.
Yeah, sure. So as Rob said, we received this funding from the Office on Violence Against Women through the Department of Justice. And so the project is to implement that interagency coordinated community response so that Hillsborough County residents have a DV system with focus on victim safety and holding offenders accountable. So overall crime is down, we know that. However, DV homicides are not. In the last 5 years, there's been 60 domestic violence homicides. So a successful coordinated community response can prevent domestic violence homicides. So we want to reduce risk by maximizing our efforts for improved formalized processes. So some of the specific goals of the coordinated community response is to decrease barriers to filing injunctions for protection, improving access to current status of no contact orders for law enforcement, expanding community-based education and training on current issues in domestic violence, including recognizing domestic violence, its dynamics, investigation, documentation, prosecution, and services, and identifying and incorporating as many CCR model principles as appropriate to our domestic violence system. Last week, we had the opportunity of having someone come from the Battered Women's Justice Project to provide technical assistance to about 10 of us key DV stakeholders. And their suggestion, along with the Office on Violence Against Women, is for us to implement a localized community coordinated response due to our population size and caseload. So I sent both of them our project narrative, and they agreed that, again, a localized CCR would be the best. They also suggested that we visit either Miami. They have a CCR that they developed more recently that's localized to them and they're successful, or Duluth, Minnesota itself, since they're like the premier and started the CCR model. So there's also a trainer position that I'm currently working on hiring for. We've received about 70 applications. We're really trying to find the perfect fit, someone that's an expert on domestic violence and training. And so I'm hoping that I'm narrowing it down and we'll have the trainer in place soon. But the trainer will train those that are in the domestic violence system. So what else we've done so far, I've interviewed an assistant public defender. I've met with our 7 injunction attorneys we have on staff with the spring and picked their brain on issues and frustrations they're having. I've had discussions with an assistant state attorney that's over misdemeanor DV. And again, we had that technical assistant visit from Anton Trapalski with the Battered Women's Justice Project. Some takeaways from that TA visit was that we need a high-risk team in our community for domestic violence. We need a process to identify high-risk offenders. We need to figure out who needs to be at the table to discuss these matters. And we all agreed that we can benefit from not working in silos, which we all felt that we're currently doing. We also received a risk and danger practice checklist for each component in the system for everyone to take with them and look at what their current processes are, and we'll come back together and discuss how we can improve those or where the gaps are. So our ask, what we need from you all is we need all hands on deck to make this a success. So we're asking for you to send a delegate to a work group for a monthly meeting. We would want this delegate to have access to data, policies and procedures, and decision-making power. We would meet monthly, and then we would ask to meet quarterly as a larger group with you all involved. So part of this work group will be continued information gathering. So that's what it's been at this point, is just information gathering. Doing these interviews, observations. I've been going to hearings. I have some ride-alongs scheduled and doing some interviews. And again, this isn't a gotcha. We don't want to throw anyone under the bus. We're just talking about improving our efforts, again, to have a better system for victims and to hold offenders accountable and just to make improvements. So what we're ironing out right now is we currently have a Hillsborough County Domestic Violence Task Force that meets every other month. So we're trying to decide if this will be a part of the Domestic Violence Task Force or if it will be a separate work group. So once we iron that out, then we'll look to scheduling meetings and looking at, again, the danger and risk assessment and what everyone's currently doing, and then suggest improvements, bring that back to you all. And what we would like to do is to have a launch. So it depends on the progress of the work group, the monthly work group, when that launch will be. We have money in the budget from the grant to bring a national expert here to train law enforcement, prosecutors, judges, all the players that are involved in the domestic violence system. And we know that not everyone can attend a one-day training, so we can do a train-the-trainer type training, or we can do a multiple-day launch. Other communities that have CCRs in place have done multiple-day launches and found that to be successful. We've already identified some of the experts, some of the options to come. So I have a list ready and waiting, and we'll continue adding to that list. But if any of you know anyone that you think would be great to come provide training, then we're open, of course, to any ideas. A part of the grant is for 5 key DV stakeholders to go visit and observe another CCR. So that's another decision that we will need to make as a group. There's also a evidence-based focused deterrence approach called the High Point Model out of North Carolina. And it's about ranking offenders, basically, and putting them on notice. And there's a training next Thursday in Clearwater. If anyone's interested in that, please contact me and I will send you information. But I plan to go, so I will bring that information back, of course. So if for now you guys can just think of who your delegates would be, what your involvement will be in this project, and then if you'll let either me or Mindy or Roseanne know. Any questions, concerns, suggestions?
So do you envision that this work group is going to be looking at both the civil aspect of the domestic violence and injunctions as well as the criminal justice system, as well as any type of pretrial intervention or misdemeanor intervention programs that exist? I mean, how big is the work group?
All of that, yes, looking at all of that.
You're envisioning, what, a couple hours for that meeting to occur?
I think monthly, yeah, anywhere between 1 to 2 hours.
And you would expect that to be boots on the ground type of individuals?
I think that would be good, but also those that have your ears, but again, it has access to policies, procedures, but I think those that are ground level really doing the work and have the information, or that they can access the information and bring it to the work group.
Any other questions, comments?
I'd just like to add that OVW and the Battered Women's Justice Project have significant amounts of technical assistance that they have assigned to this particular grant program. And during the new orientation that we went to a couple months ago, they indicated that as we're moving along, if there's components of the system or stakeholders that are part of the system that maybe want to do a deeper look at their own individual organizations, they could have access to some of that technical assistance as well. And it could be on the side. Just let us know that they're doing it. And they don't have to, for instance, report everything that's going on. So let's say a small law enforcement agency wanted to do a soup to nuts review of their processes, but didn't want everyone to be aware of some of the warts in their system. We can do that as well, and just to improve their own individual organizations.
And as we're going through the danger risk assessment checklist, maybe those from your organizations will see that, maybe there's some things that they didn't know were gaps. And then, yes, like Rob said, then, you can get that individualized TA assistance.
And you'll identify the people that you think would be appropriate to go visit either Duluth or Miami?
I think that'll be a group decision. And I know that the grant pays for 5 people, but there may be more that want to, to go. I'm not sure. But yes, we'll be discussing that.
Do you know if the two work similarly, or are they adapted to the community needs?
From what I'm finding in my research, they're adapted to the community needs. And those that do this work nationwide, those that provide the TA, also confirm that.
Commissioner?
Thank you. Are you going to have like a final work product that you're going to bring back here and then make recommendations, or?
Yes, we're going to be working towards that. Of course, that's going to take time. So right now, it's just, again, the information gathering, the observing on what we are doing, what we should be doing, and then what we could be doing. And then again, we would like to meet, quarterly, maybe not everyone in this room, but who would be appropriate in this project to report that out and get feedback, and then, share those results.
Okay. So I imagine it's really involves law enforcement and prosecute the public defender and obviously our state attorney in such a big way, because I think there's policies that could evolve that maybe I or city council could help you with, but I'm just kind of interested to see what will come out of this and what Duluth. Actually, if you have a work product that came out of Duluth, I'd like to see that. if that's available to us.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I can send that to you.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
If you would send that to Ms. Preza, she could actually get it out to all of us, and then perhaps somewhere, I'd like an opportunity to talk with the chief judge and the state attorney and Mr. Parkinson to see if they feel it's appropriate for us to still work under the PSCC domestic violence work group, and maybe we can make adjustments there. But my experience says that if you have 5 meetings that deal with domestic violence, it will affect attendance somewhere along the line, so we, we'll
Right. And we don't want to do that at all. So,
but I would like the chief judge's input into this, and I know that Renee will want to talk to Mr. Warren about something like this, and I don't mind traveling on my own to go see something. I would rather, but I'd like for you to tell me, is Miami more like what we are, or is Duluth? And if it's Duluth, I would like to go in the warmest month.
I agree. And I think it's in the grant that we go within the first year. So, yeah.
So, Ms. Holt, you have already volunteered, so you will be
Not to
going.
Duluth, though.
But if you recall, when we first agreed to embark on this journey, it was important to a lot of the stakeholders that we could adopt the model to meet the needs of Hillsborough County. And CCR, you can absolutely adapt it. What they've done in Miami is closer to what we'll probably end up doing here. Duluth started it, so they've been the trailblazer. But in terms of what would work best for us, they have the same state court system. They have a lot of the same processes, so it would probably be better to go to Miami. But I'll leave that for Tennille and her staff to kind of work out the details. It'd also be cheaper for us to go to Miami
Right.
than
In one of the cooler months.
Duluth.
I mean, I don't mind sending people to Duluth or something like that, really, if you think it's appropriate to see it, but it would, it's only going to be like a handful of people in my office that would be involved in something like this, that would be able to generate approval for policies as the meeting's occurring.
Right.
And also, I also attend the task force. A lot of the same stakeholders that are on our PSCC committee are on the task force or their designees. So part of the second C is comprehensive and community. So I think it would make sense for us to amalgamate these groups so we're all swimming in the same direction.
Yeah, I really, I do think that there is something that is needed in the community, because I'm active with the Free Network, the group that does human trafficking, and yet we've never had anything like that for domestic violence, so to speak, that has really, Bay Area focused. A lot of people show up for it, and kind of. So I'm very interested in this and hope we can get something moving forward, because this is something that happens every single day. I mean, it is, domestic violence is here, and it affects much greater numbers than we have on the other, some of the other issues. And I'm not pitting one against the other, but I do think that this really deserves the community attention and to develop some kind of a collaborative model.
Thank you.
Anyone else, comments? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
We really
you.
appreciate it. Welcome to Hillsborough County. Hope you enjoy it here.
Thank you.
Mr. Parkinson, if you could catch us up on the meeting that you are the vice chair and Judge Ficarota is the chair. Judge Ficarota is on a well-deserved vacation at this time, and so
Absolutely. The meeting you're referring to is actually it's a mental health court involved meeting with a specific focus on Chapter 916 issues. Those individuals that are found incompetent to proceed or not guilty by reason of insanity, working through the felony system. Back in January, a representative from the State Department of Children and Families had requested to give a presentation to the Public Safety Coordinating Council. Her name was Leah Vale Compton. She came and gave probably a 25-minute presentation, PowerPoint included, on the current status of the 916 system, not just throughout the state, but with a specific focus here in Hillsborough County. And long story short is that the number of 916 referrals to the state hospital were going up. She had asked the PSCC to take a closer look at any trends that might be impacting those increased 916 numbers. You subsequently formed the meeting, or the group, the subcommittee, chaired by Chief Judge Figueroa, vice chaired by me. We convened the meeting last month. We had great attendance. Ms. Val Compton came as well and gave us more up-to-date data, which included last fiscal year's data. And it did show an increase in 916 referrals to the state hospital. There's a lot of good discussion about the factors that are driving that. I have a summary put together. It's been submitted to the Chief Judge for approval. But there are a lot of factors going on. Probably one of the big takeaways for me was that the primary forensic services provider here in Hillsborough County has experienced 100% turnover in their staff in the last 6 months. These are the staff that are tasked with going to the jail, assessing somebody, determining whether or not they're appropriate for a diversion to a community referral, like a FACT team or intensive case management team, or short-term placement in a crisis unit and stabilization. So with that turnover, it appears to have had a significant impact. Some of the other factors that are driving it is the elimination of SRTs, which are civil placements that we used to have here in Hillsborough County. We had 2 SRTs, one at Northside, one at Grace Point, and we were allowed to send folks there civilly for longer-term treatment, usually up to 6 months, although they had the ability to go longer if necessary. The Department of Children and Families actually eliminated those here in Hillsborough County about 7 years ago, 8 years ago. So a lot of folks that would have gone to the state hospital, we were able to divert to these local SRTs. We have 2 programs that are operating really well through Grace Point. One is basically their residential forensic program, but they're full with a significant wait list. They also have an intensive forensic team called GFIT. They are also full with a wait list. So it's really become a situation where there's really no room at the inn here. And when Hillsborough is sending folks to state hospital, it's 1, because they either need to be there, or 2, there is not an appropriate, less restrictive service here in Hillsborough County. So what are we doing? DCF is going to take back these issues to Tallahassee and let them know what some of our concerns are. The primary forensic services provider has hired new staff to replace the ones that have left. As of 2 weeks ago, they were going through training, so hopefully they get up to speed very quickly, and that can help curtail some of these referrals. But also taking a look at some of the intricacies of the cases. Tallahassee is going to take a closer look at each of the forensic referral packets. On a number of occasions, they have sent us information saying, basically, why is this person going? It's a third-degree felony. We found out that they're only looking at the current charge. They're not looking at the pattern of charges. So if someone perhaps poses a threat that's not articulated in the current charge, they're not looking at that. So that's another message we gave to them, to look at the totality of the circumstances. So they'll be doing that. They've also offered to come down and do some training with the local service providers. And the first service provider they're going to be focusing on is that primary forensic service provider here in Hillsborough County. They're actually sending state resources to help them get off the ground and get back to where they need to be. And then we'll reassess.
Questions or comments to Mr. Parkinson?
I will say the healthcare plan is added a lot more beds. And we did it as a result of our opioid task force. So I know that we're trying to help on this SRT situation. And I do think the number of beds, I think we had 30-some beds. I don't know how many you got, Mary Lynn. 20, 15. But we've added a good number of beds to help with the short-term situation. So you may want to visit with Jean early. And if we need, we're kind of like on a holding pattern now because we increased our eligibility. I don't know if y'all know this. We've gone to 138% of federal poverty level, so there's no gap between somebody qualifying for Medicaid and our health care plan. So we're kind of like trying to calm down to see what effect that's going to have on the trust fund budget. But I think if there still continues to have this need, that we'll try and do what we can with the Healthcare Advisory Board. We just have to have something solid to take to them to show, a need and where the beds would go and that type of thing.
These are locked beds. The SLP beds are locked beds, and the forensic beds are locked beds. So having those locked would be key.
Yeah,
No, absolutely.
that's the issue.
And the resources that the Healthcare Advisory Board and our Board of County Commissioners, mostly led by Commissioner Merman, to bring additional resources to our system has been instrumental. And as recently as I believe it was this week, there was discussion about our specialty courts. Those resources have been instrumental in a lot of the criminal justice diversion programming that we have done, and our specialty courts. Without those resources, we would not be as successful as we have been. So thank you for that, Commissioner
Would
Merman.
we be allowed to fund locked beds from the healthcare plan? I'm not sure.
Well, the county would be able to, but the holdoff has been that Gene felt like it was the state that was responsible for SRT
Yes,
beds.
oh, yeah.
So that's a very good point, and that is true.
Right.
Both in Chapter 394, which covers the Baker Act, people who are ordered to the state hospital, that becomes a state financial responsibility. And the same thing with individuals who are referred to the state hospital under Chapter 916 as ITP
Right.
or NGRI, that becomes their responsibility.
Yeah, I knew it was a state, that's why I asked if we could even
You can. but
venture
I don't know
into
if you
that,
wanna-
but I don't, but then if we fund it, then the state's not gonna help us, so.
And that's a very good observation, Commissioner. And one of the things that we observed during our meeting with DCF last month was that there's actually a statutory limit on the days that individuals who have been ordered to the state hospital can wait in jail, and it's 15 days. State can't take any longer to get people to state hospital. There is no such legal limit on the civil side for people who have been committed on the civil side. So what that means is because they have to take people on the forensic side, but do not have to take them in any rapid order on the civil side, all the 916s in the state are taking over the civil beds. So here in Hillsborough County, we've had situations. Grace Point has had an individual that has been on their crisis unit for 8 months waiting for a civil state hospital bed.
Yeah, it's a squeeze wherever you look at it. And the state did come through and replace the funding that they took away last year, which I think is helpful to a lot of our providers. But I think if you have counterparts in some of these other counties, maybe we should look at really making a strong case for the Bay Area and take it to the legislature and really start to demand that we get funding for SRT beds.
I think
Next year.
that's a wonderful idea, Commissioner Merman. And there was a time when the Tampa Bay region had the most robust
Yeah.
SRT system in the
know.
entire state. We had a regional
I
SRT.
funded it when I was in the legislature.
Absolutely. With the closure of G. Pierce Wood State Hospital in Arcadia,
Right.
you were able to secure, I believe it was $24 million funding for the Suncoast region to increase the beds. We had 2 SRTs in Hillsborough. We had 2 in Pinellas. We had 1 in Pasco. We had 1 in Manatee. And what that meant is if there was a bed available for our clients in Pinellas, we would be able to send them over there wherever the beds were available, all paid for by the state. DCF took that away.
Okay. I think that would be a good project.
Can I ask a
Ye-
question?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Frank.
Richard, you're so good at this, and I'm so happy, that Sandy's a good advocate on the county side, because it is a serious problem. And I'm thinking about that little Phoebe and John Chuck, whatever
John
his name
Chuck.
was. Here, he obviously was mentally ill at the time. He may have been capable of standing trial, but for heaven's sakes, who would do that to a child? Somehow that didn't get caught. But the thing that worried me was the attorney who called DCF or called somebody to try to warn them that he was going to do something to that child. Where did that end up? It never was clear to me what dropped in the hole there. Because she knew he was going to harm that child and wanted him taken back, taken back.
So there's been comprehensive analysis of that particular case. It actually originated in Hillsborough County, and there were multiple stakeholders that touched that case. Hindsight is 20/20, and that's always the case with these critical incidents. There was law enforcement agencies that had come in contact right before the incident. There was the attorney that had come into contact. It was a mental health issue. It was a child welfare issue. It was very complicated. Again, in hindsight is 20/20. It's hard to assign any specific blame. But
I'm not talking about blame. I'm talking about what happened in the chain breaking down. Where did it break down? Was it start from the very beginning?
Do you want me to help? Okay. Really, what happens in those cases is everybody's in a silo. All these providers that deal with these families, they're all in silo. Attorneys, mental health providers, so whatever it is, child welfare. And there's no real data sharing going on between them. So the caseworkers just did not have access to that information. And unfortunate, but I will tell you, next month, we're introducing to the commission our plan to help alleviate these problems for the future. And Ramin's going to build a data sharing system. It's been blessed by DCF. In fact, they've chosen us as an innovation site to really move this forward and try to break down these barriers so we can have access to all the information a caseworker would need.
Well, I'm not surprised, because I've got to tell you that when my daughter was with stage 4 cancer in the hospital, and we wanted to find out what an analysis had been of her condition when she was at Moffitt, and she was at Tampa General at this point, we couldn't get the information because they didn't talk to one another data-wise.
Yeah, it's a big
We had to
problem.
go out physically and drive out there and get a disc, and then bring the disc down to Tampa General, and then find somebody who could do it, and nobody could do it. It was frustrating to me beyond belief.
Yep.
What is happening in terms of the electronic systems that are just frozen in time? They're not doing anything. They think they've got a great system, but they don't. It doesn't work.
Well, they're great systems within their little silos and their own environments. But as you know, we've got this world of security now. So people are building security, big-time security. Police department will tell you this, sheriff, so that people can't hack into and get this information and do terrible things with it.
It's
So,
easy enough for us to do it. We have a system where both the state attorney and the public defender, who are arguing against each other in court, can't share certain information, but they can share other information.
right.
And we can figure it out. So why can't
Mind-boggling.
anybody else? We're not genius.
Well, we're giving it a try. So stay tuned. Trying to prevent these things from
Please
happening.
make sure Tampa General is taken care of. Anybody else.
And Rob,
I could tell Tampa General.
right, and Rob, from our standpoint in our office, what we started to do about a year ago is we're starting to track incompetent to proceeds from the adult standpoint, from the adult side, when they're sent and how soon they're returned, and then how soon thereafter they're again incompetent to proceed and they are returned. And so that's especially in the area of violent crime. because that's an area that we have certainly noticed significant issues with, where you go up there, you're up there about 45 days, they send you back. And the decompensation is within 2 to 3 weeks. And in homicide cases in particularly, number one, preparation on our part is extremely important, and obviously from the state attorney's standpoint and law enforcement, they're dealing with the victims' families and things like that, and we're just seeing some significant problems there.
Absolutely, Ms. Holt, and that was one of the factors that was identified. I just neglected to report it in my brief summary. It is included in the written narrative that I've submitted to the Chief Judge for approval. We also asked DCF to take a look at that. You used the time frame of 45 days. We have some that were around a week.
Right. Yes.
And there will always be differences in clinical opinion between local experts and experts, 300 miles away. That's always going to happen. But when you have an individual who's maybe been in the jail for a year and eventually found, ITP, to send them up there and turn them back around in a week is absolutely ridiculous. You cannot get a comprehensive clinical picture of somebody with that significant of an issue in a week. So we did identify that, and your staff did agree to document that and keep a list, and the Chief Judge and team will be submitting that to Tallahassee so they can take a second look at it.
And I'm not sure whether they brought to your attention or not that we had a concern as to who was evaluating and who was signing reports, and if people were signing reports having never had contact with our clients. So we had a little bit global concern about what was going on up there.
So there was discussion. In fact, when DCF comes in to look at possible pitfalls in a system, that's always a low-hanging fruit that they can look at. When we were in our last, I don't want to call it a crisis, but forensic crisis back in 05, 06, that was a significant factor. Essentially, the system that the state has for documenting somebody as an approved evaluator is going to a training that Florida Mental Health Institute provides across the state. Once you're on the list, you are on the list. It doesn't require you to go to any additional trainings to keep abreast of emerging system changes or new evidence-based practices. There's no requirements whatsoever. Now, the new forensic coordinator for the state, Leah Val Compton, is trying to go through the list and find out who's still practicing, who's retired, who's moved, who's dead, who needs to come off that evaluator list, because that's the system that they have. Once you go on, you never go off. Back in 05, 06, what we did is we had a series of trainings. We invited every single person in Hillsborough County that was certified to be an evaluator to receive training on community resources, train them so they knew what the least restrictive alternatives are and what could be provided in the community. What was an SRT? What was a crisis stabilization unit? How do we make a referral? How do we get somebody on a FACT team? All those things were brought to the attention of the evaluators. Well, that was 13, 14 years ago, and there has been no continued effort since then. So the group will be working on that. Both the forensic providers locally and Tallahassee will be trying to reach out to those evaluators and get them up to speed. We have some evaluators that are, at the courthouse every other day. We know they've remained abreast of them, and they're great. And your people know who they are, and the Chief Judge knows who they are. But we need to get those other evaluators, especially when, in those occasions where other opinions are sought, we need to get them up to speed as well. So that's one of the issues that they're looking at.
Well, we got really concerned that judges rely tremendously on these opinions that are coming back, and if it's not someone that is certified, well, number one, it'd be nice if they were an MD. Then if they were a psychiatrist, that'd be even better. But we have some concerns, and from a financial standpoint, my due process budget was busted this year, and I don't know if anyone else's was, but a lot of it had to do with the mental health evaluations piece, because when they get back here, we're required by law to reevaluate them, and that's another 30 to 60-day delay, so it really would be very beneficial if we put a more efficient process together.
I concur, and if you recall, back in 05, 06, the evaluations were very poorly written, And basically, 916 requires a number of opinions to be given during that evaluation process. And 0506, all they were doing was opining whether they were incompetent to proceed or not. They weren't opining whether it was an appropriate community resource or service that could restore them locally. And Ms. Frank's staff actually helped us out with that, and they were reviewing every single evaluation to look for quantitative methods. So did they include any recommendations for local services? Did they address every single item that's listed under Chapter 916? And within a few months, about 6 months, we got every evaluator up to snuff, because essentially what was happening is if they didn't include all those opinions, we weren't utilizing their evaluation.
Well, I tell you what happens. The legislature doesn't want us to fund things like child and family services. If you put it under safety, because some of these people are mentally unstable who go out and kill children in the schools, put it under guns, you know, instead of guns being bought, that it's a substitute. Figure out a way to address the issue in a way that it forces the legislature to have to fund it, because they are never going to do it otherwise. They always back away from anything dealing with mental health or anything that are the soft issues that are really the causes of a lot of the problems that we have. And Sandy, you know it too.
Now, just to dovetail on what Commissioner Merman indicated earlier, you know, one of the things that I do is I look at state agency budgets, look where the money's going, look and see who's getting it. Is it necessary and sufficient to do the job? And there's a lot of money in child welfare, both at the CBC level and the sub-provider level. But I think the issue, as Commissioner Merman indicated, is those silos. Those sometimes artificial silos that are created where one agency knows something is going on, but they're either forbidden from sharing that information, or they're just not in the place. They're so worried about one issue in the child's welfare, they're not focusing on all those other protective factors that need to be looked at, including the parental issues that you mentioned. So, I think making the system more efficient, I think better communication is really the next best step. You can throw money at a problem all day long, but unless you actually change the system and make it work efficiently, it's not going to do any good.
That's the problem.
Any other comments? Ms. Ulrich?
I just wondered how many 916s are waiting for state hospital. I thought they had to go within a certain,
They have to go within 15
Days.
calendar days.
okay,
We have that data, and it's with the summary that went to the chief judge.
okay.
I don't remember off the top of my head.
But they've gone if it's been 15
Yes,
days?
the
Okay.
state of Florida has not eclipsed the 15-day limit in Hillsborough County, because if they did, there's legal recourse that, for instance,
Okay.
back in 0506, Ms. Holt took to make sure that they did. And also in Pinellas County and Pasco County, they took significant legal action to ensure the state did, including contempt of court charges for the DCF secretary.
Okay.
I had another question about the drug court, the Veterans Court when you, at the end.
Okay, Mr. Bates?
I'm just wondering, could it be that some of the reasons they don't want to share this information is they're worried about liability to their agencies?
There's a variety of reasons. Some of it is they think it's protected health information under HIPAA, which is the federal privacy law. Some of it is state law, whether it's somebody who's Baker-actable under Chapter 394. Some of it is DJJ-involved youth in Chapter 985. So there's all these laws that are out there spinning around that people are afraid of violating. But the reality is there's ways to address it, and there's ways to comprehensively address it. And, I have never seen a HIPAA jail. There's not a jail next to Falkenberg Road where HIPAA violators go and are incarcerated for terms of years. There are ways to address emergent situations. There are ways to appropriately share information for healthcare treatment, payment, and operations that we could be utilizing as a community that we don't.
You can create software for that.
The problem with HIPAA violations, yeah, there's no jail, but people can lose their medical license.
And there are financial fines as well.
And financial fines, and that's a tough one.
It is $50,000 an
It
incident.
hit, yes.
Ms. Ulrich, you had a comment on Veterans Court?
Just to let you know, and there, besides regular HIPAA violations, there's what's called 42 CFR, which is substance abuse prevents us from sharing, even if somebody's in treatment, if you know they're there. I can't tell you they're there. They have to reach out to you, so it's very awkward. I wanted to mention the Veterans Treatment Court. I'm hopeful from what you said. Is there some hope that we might continue this? We're the provider for that court and for residential, and we have, in July, we have to stop taking admissions if it's a 3-month admission. So I'm trying to figure out, is there certified forward funds? Is there an opportunity we might continue, or?
I think the first meeting that we're having is to just identify the implications of the expansion.
Okay.
But Julie Holt, the public defender, thinks we might be a little short on providers for services for this new group.
Okay.
That's just Julie Holt, the public defender. That is no one else's opinion at this
Okay.
point,
Okay.
because we haven't had a meeting.
With regard to this is regarding the funding that's lapsing at the end of the state fiscal year for Veterans Treatment Court Services. There's not an alternative funding source at this time.
Okay, so I'm supposed to stop taking referrals July 1?
We can't reapply for the same funding source. That's the problem, and there hasn't been a means to facilitate applying to a different funding source to provide the same.
Okay.
We'll find some.
We're going to meet to try and,
$1 million? 900,000. Oh, good. Well, that
I mean,
sounds
it's-
better than
So,
I mean, it's not the amount of money that you would think that it would be that would
Right.
should have broken
Right.
the continued funding in any way. I mean, it wasn't.
That'd be a
anything else.
grant or
Correct.
something.
it's one of those issues that we really do need to have a meeting, because what we've done, the stakeholders have done, have cobbled together a variety of funding sources to address the need. For instance, we are funding the Public Defender's Office and the case management component, peer assistant component, through justice assistance grants, which we can continue as long as the PSCC approves it. And then we've funded other components through DCF, Department of Children and Families Reinvestment Act grants. And then the courts have actually gotten some grants from SAMHSA. And we've weaved all those funding sources together to make the program a success. So just to keep this in mind, we have a lot of irons in the fire that we're trying to sort out and figure how we're going to continue the level of effort. And it's great that the state is allowing BTC to grow, but we also have the issue of mental health court funding from the state of Florida going away in January. And that's a big concern because the program has been incredibly successful. It got up and running much quicker than we thought we would. It's achieved its milestones much quicker than we thought it would. And it's grown in leaps and bounds. So that is another issue that we are trying to address. And I've been working with management budget to try and find some funds for next year to cover that. But with the specialty courts, I mean, we've just been very, very lucky, and they've been operating so well, especially VTC and mental health court. And it's the success shows the reason for the need. Drug court as well, yes.
I mean, it helps you really identify some true issues that exist, and it also helps you identify, in our office, it helped us identify a couple of training issues that we needed within our office. So it's, when you specialize like this, it really adds a lot. And I want to thank the commissioner for coming to see our mental health court. Really appreciate it. No, I want to thank you for doing that. That was fun, just to see.
Eye-opener.
There was more funding that was allocated this year for OSCA, for the court services to provide veterans court and those kind of things. It would be a different funding than we have. So we might want to consider that.
For the Hillsborough County State Court out of OSCA, but there were other courts that received funding for problem-solving courts outside of Hillsborough County, but Hillsborough County didn't get any
I
dedicated money.
understood it was open. There were open funds, not specific to other counties.
In the future fiscal year, forthcoming July? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
All right, then, at this time, we'll move through. Is there any new business to be discussed? The only thing I'd like to tell you is on June the 13th at 6 o'clock p.m., June 13th at 6 o'clock p.m., at the Children's Board, Safe and Sound Hillsborough will have its Health and Family Services Subcommittee have a town hall meeting. The topic will be mental health. It is requested from Safe and Sound Hillsborough that each head of agencies come to this particular meeting at the front end to be introduced. If you want to say a few words, certainly you can, but it'll be a work group for boots on the ground types of individuals, but I think it would be important for all of us to be there and listen. I think the sheriff has indicated to me already that he will be able to make it. The chief judge has indicated that he would be able to make it. Chief, I'm hopeful that you all can make it also. It'll be the beginning of several town hall meetings that will occur over the next year in order to have discussions about mental health. Although there is probably going to be some type of observation about crisis intervention training, this is much more to have a conversation with the community on the things that we can do better in this area. So that we can all be more aware, better educated, know who to call, know when to call, know how to call, things of that sort. So I would encourage all of you to at least stop by, if for anything else, just the first 30 minutes. The Children's Board on Palm,
Yeah, I know.
and it starts at 6. There'll be a flyer coming out. I just want to have an opportunity to say this to y'all publicly today, that it'd be great if y'all could come out and support what I consider to be one of the most important conversations that needs to occur in our community. Any other comments, any other announcements? Public comment. Mr. Parkinson, before Mr. McCray comes up, and Ms. Ulrey, go ahead, start coming up, Mr. McCray. Mr. Parkinson?
I just had one thing as a reminder. On June 8th is the 12th Annual Reentry Resource Expo. Last year, the Public Safety Coordinating Council was a co-sponsor of that event and was held at the Children's Board. It had a tremendous amount of resources for ex-offenders and their families to learn how to be linked to services when they came out of prison and jail. This year, although we're not formally coordinating on it, we have been asked to help out, and we have been helping the West Central Region Advisory Board, also known as the Lee Davis Neighborhood Advisory Board, execute that reentry resource event. As part of that, there's going to be a roundtable from 1:30 to 3 o'clock. All the PSCC has invited the entire day, which runs from, I believe it's 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Yeah, 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock. But from 1:30 to 3, there's actually a roundtable where many members of this group will actually be discussing issues surrounding individuals coming back to the community from prison and jail, law enforcement agencies, state attorney's office, public defender's office. We also will have 2 or 3 ex-offenders on the panel as well to talk about their experiences coming back to the community, things that worked well for them, things that didn't work well for them. We're going to have a couple employers who specifically go out of their way to employ ex-offenders. And then we're going to have a few community provider agencies like A. Brown Ministries and so forth. So it's a great event. It's not going to be quite as large of scope and scale as last year, but I think it's important as a community that we keep up the level of effort and focus on the importance of appropriate reentry and wrapping people around with services as they come out of jail and prison to prevent them from coming back in the front door. And I actually have some of the save-the-date documents here created by Lee Davis. And then the state attorney's office actually did a very nice one as well. Maybe they can send.
They can't, she was waiting to hear back that it was okay.
Okay.
So if they need to add anything else or anyone else's logos.
Okay.
She will.
And it sounds like they're open if anyone actually wants their logo added to the flyer.
You want us to distribute
Yes, pass this around if you could.
here or out in the public?
Yes.
All right.
If anyone wants their logo added to the event, wants to participate, of course, they also have a vendor area. So provider agencies, state agencies have sections where ex-offenders and their families members can come. One of the great things that we did last year is we actually had a series of presentations. They were about 30 minutes, 45 minutes in length that ex-offenders and their families could go through. We are doing the same thing this year. And the titles are Welcome Home, and it's being provided by Florida Department of Corrections. It's actually probation officers who will be talking about the reentry process to ex-offenders and their families. There's a presentation on making supervision work for those individuals that are currently or will be on felony probation, how to successfully complete felony probation. There'll be a 30-minute presentation on finding and keeping employment, which is an important component at preventing recidivism. The State Attorney's Office will be doing a presentation on expungement of records for those that are eligible or their family members that are eligible. And then our partners at Department of Corrections actually have agreed to provide a 30-minute presentation on Spectrum, which is their new assessment and reentry system that they'll be utilizing. We've been hearing a lot about it. About a year and a half ago, some folks from Tallahassee came to Hillsborough County, did a presentation on their strategic vision from Spectrum. And basically, as individuals come into the Department of Corrections system, I believe it happens on intake.
Yes.
They'll actually get a comprehensive assessment to determine what their individual needs are during their term of incarceration. So if a person has substance abuse needs, to make sure they have substance abuse services and treatment while they are in prison. But in addition to linking them to appropriate services while in prison, it will help link them to services upon reentry. So when they come through HREC, our Hillsborough Reentry Center, when they get referred to agencies like DACO or ACTS, it's much more comprehensive in terms of how those individual needs are referred to the community. So they're going to give us a nice 30, 45-minute presentation on Spectrum. It's been a year and a half. Some things have evolved. Some components of Spectrum have evolved and been adapted in different ways than they had originally visioned. So they're going to give us kind of the current pulse of the Spectrum system. And that'll be the final presentation on the 8th.
All right. Mr. McCray, sir, good morning.
Good morning. Let me rest from staying up so long.
But you're growing.
Good morning. My name is Alvin McCray. My alias is Al McCray. I'm with TampaNewsAndTalk.com. I'm here to speak about Amendment 4 and the travesty that's going on with that. About 65% of the voters approved that giving felonies the right to vote, except for a few limited situations. I think rape, murder, and messing with a child is one of them. Hillsborough County is probably one of the largest counties in the state to send a lot of people to jail. In our county, there's probably over 100,000 ex-felons. Hillsborough County, over the last, at least the last 10 years, has convicted 12 to 15,000 people per year, and 92% of those were felony records. I think it was very disingenuous that the legislature would wait until after the amendment passed before they came up with this other thing. I think there should be alternatives to paying the money. Hillsborough County can be the lead county in the state. The legislature may let each judicial district decide how they want to deal with the situation. But the main thing I think I want to harp on is that instead of them paying the money, which is due, it should be other alternative means. Public service is one of them. How about if you got a GED after you got out of jail? If you became a homeowner? If you became a professional craftsman? If you went to a trade school? If your credit score is like 700 or above? These are factors that should show that you are a good person. But it's really a shame that one out of 5 African Americans in the state cannot vote. 20% of the population cannot vote. And that's really a travesty. This may very well end up in court, decided in court. It's amazing how I'm guessing like 5 to 6 million people can say yes, and less than 200 people in the legislature can say no. But I guess that's how our Republican form of government works. Republican, not Republican form of government work. If the legislature was going to do this, they should have made the intention known before the vote. And if the voters wanted this to be a part of the law, they would have said that. The people who owe money, they should be made aware of this amount, and the department who owed the money to should be given no more than 2 years to find those records. If they can't find the record, then the debt should be just written off, plain and simple, written off. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Comments, questions? Ms. Burton?
Thank you. Hey, Sandy.
Good morning, Connie Burton. I wanted to just touch on the domestic violence comprehensive model. And I don't know if it asked in their research, but I'm interested in, as a community person, to having the community to better understand cause and effect, the root cause. And so in their discovery, as they go about doing, implementing that grant, if that information can be given back to the community, that would be helpful. Also, in the data collection, if we would know the race and the income, because we believe that that's a profound effect of what ignites some of these issues inside of our community. And so I would be interested in knowing that. And I'm also here to plead to this body to deal with this issue around Amendment 4. This recurrence of the people speak the will of the people by the vote. Then we have a small group of folks that have made a determination that they're going to make it harder for us. Of course, there has been a lot of discussion around this amendment. We're talking about the vestige of slavery. We're talking about poll tax. We're talking about those that have had powers to transform this state so everybody can participate. If we could believe that once a person have committed crime, that somehow there's a pathway back into society. But what we continue to see is nothing but roadblocks. Roadblocks in terms of people that's coming home that can't find apartments, can't find jobs. And then folks question, why do we see this recidivism continuation? So Amendment 4 was a glaring hope that people would have, people would have an opportunity to move toward this pathway toward democracy. And so each county will make a determination what they feel will be beneficial. But we're hoping here in Hillsborough County, money don't be the rule of all things. I believe, like Mr. McCray just laid out, that people that want to be on the right side of history can come up with alternative plans that would give people an opportunity to say, welcome back to this county without being saddled with so many debts and burdens. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Connie Burton that was speaking to us. Any comments or questions? Any other public comment? Mr. Martinez, good to see you, sir. Elvin Martinez in our audience, good to see you, sir. He's our chair of our Juvenile Justice Board. Anything else before we adjourn? Ms.
Just wanted to
Ulrey?
go back to, the school district put out the grant. We had a presentation by the school district's safety officer, if y'all remember that presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
And the other side of that for the Marjorie Stoneham Douglas incident that occurred in South Florida was a $4 million grant to the school district for mental health, improving mental health in the schools. $2 million of that, the school district themselves hired about 9 people to lead the internal part of that. And then the community was allowed to apply for the other $2 million. I pulled together the 5 people that actually work in the school districts. It says for Kids and Families, Grace Point, DACO, Northside, and Chrysalis, and applied for that grant together. And we actually, because we needed somebody to gather the data, and Grace Point nor I wanted to do that, we asked Central Florida Behavioral Health Network to be the lead and to do the data collection. And they will be vouchering those services out to the 5 of us. So that award was just happened at the last school board meeting. So I wanted to bring that up. We're really excited about that. School district's huge, so we needed lots of people.
Well, congratulations. It's good to see a good collaborative such as that will hopefully benefit our students here in Hillsborough County and our school system. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Lewis.
I would like to comment on what Mr. McCray and Ms. Burton had to say. Amendment 4 is very important. I know, Mr. Perkins, you're doing the reentry programs and the meetings and stuff in the community, but it's good to have the meetings and have the people there. But if the people are leaving and they still feel like they're not real 100% citizens and a whole person, and I hate to say that because that goes back in the day where we were counted, most African American people all together were counted as 1/5 of a man. So I think, just sitting here thinking that Hillsborough County needs to be a lead and take a lead and be an example to the rest of the state of Florida, and we need to figure out how we can help with this restitution, or how we can help assist some of the people who we want them to be gainful citizens in our community, so when they come back to Hillsborough County. So I would like to ask anyone on this board, or ask this board, if we can look into it. Pat, the NAACP would be more than welcome to help sit down and figure out what we can do to help alleviate some of the pain that they have to do in order to get their rights back. It is so important to these individuals. We can talk about it all day. We can have these meetings. We can give them resources, but it's nothing like feeling like I belong when you go home. So I just want y'all to take that with y'all and explore what can we do in Hillsborough County to make this county set off better than the other counties in the state of Florida, and maybe we can start a trend here. I just wanted to say that.
And so the reason for silence on my part right now is I'm trying to go through my head what the statute says about what this Public Safety Coordinating Council's mission is. I know that we're an advisory board to the Board of County Commissions, so this may be one of those subjects that has to be driven through a different group of people. Not that everyone here wouldn't be interested in the subject matter, but I think I'm going to have to read the statute more carefully, look at the bylaws, and probably touch base with the chair of the Board of County Commission to see if this is something that they would want us to take a look at. Given that, obviously, as the public defender here, we are presently in the process of closely reading the bill that was passed in order to ascertain what it is that we should be doing as the attorneys who advocate for individuals who, for instance, are having their probation terminated, or perhaps when fines are being imposed or costs are being imposed, whether or not there's a true ability to pay, whether it be today or whether it be 5 years from now. Because a lot of the discussions that have been had is there are a lot of statutes that have $50,000 fines, $250,000 fines. It's very rare that those are going to be paid. A lot of those are minimum mandatory types of things. Restitution, as you know, is a very tough subject because there is a strong, strong sentiment that a victim of a crime should be made whole. But in terms of fines and costs, especially the mandatory ones, we're in the process of analyzing how perhaps we should better frame any types of negotiations that might occur, for instance, and perhaps discussions that we might have in front of a judge in terms of the ability to pay. Obviously, that'll have to go through an appellate process at some point. Everybody will have to do whatever they feel is their appropriate job, and then you just move forward through the system on that. But I think you're going to see individual agencies trying to see what we can do to assist in these challenges.
Thank you.
Ms. Frank.
I also want to say, sometimes the state puts us in situations we don't want to be in. The clerks have to keep track of their performance on collections. They think that because we collect the money, although they take it from us, that we've got to meet a certain performance. And so we have 9 sections that we're gauged on, and they've given us a percentage that we have to collect, or else we're going to get dinged with our budgets. So it puts us in a situation where I don't want to have big fines against somebody and they can't drive a car or whatever they're going to do. I mean, although we don't do it on driving cars, but I don't want to punish them over again. But I'm in a quandary because I gotta meet these standards the state gives me. And some things we'll never collect, like, for instance, in our county, we're supposed to collect 9% of the circuit criminal cases, fines, fees, and costs. We can't do that possibly. It used to be much higher than that. They lowered it because they realized that these people, the fines are usually drug-related, and they're up in the millions of dollars. These people are never gonna be able to pay those fines. If we put them on a program that was a pay program and they're in jail, they're never gonna pay it off. We collect about 7%, so we fall below even the 9%. When we get up into county civil, our performance record has to be 90%. We collect 99% of that 90%. So that's all right, because these people are able to pay it. But when you get into some of these criminal things, they can't pay them. They're in jail. And they're not gonna get out of jail without paying them. It's a problem. It really is a problem. And restitution, I don't know how you're going to calculate restitution because we don't keep track of that. That's not a fine, fee, or cost. It's a restitution.
Right.
And it's very difficult to determine when the judge has ordered that. And so, you know, we have to, we're being very liberal within the confines that we can. And I can't do anything more. If I can do more, boy, I'll do it.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank everyone for a robust conversation today on several matters that are obviously important to this community, and certainly wish you all a safe and warm summer. And thank you all very much for coming today. Mr. Bates moves we adjourn.
Yes, I did. Thank you.